The air was thick with the smell of burnt metal and ozone. The cadet crouched low, their boots sinking into the soft, ashen soil of the abandoned moon. This was supposed to be a routine training mission, just another test of survival skills for a Deathworlder like them. But nothing about this place felt routine. The silence was unnatural, broken only by the faint hum of their suit's oxygen recycler. They moved cautiously, their eyes scanning the jagged ruins that jutted out of the ground like broken teeth. The briefing had said this moon was uninhabited, a relic of some long-forgotten war. Yet, as the cadet stepped over a shattered pillar, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. A faint glow caught their eye. It was coming from a crevice in the ground, barely visible beneath a layer of dust and debris. The cadet hesitated, their training screaming at them to stay focused, to complete the mission and return to the academy. But something about that glow pulled at them, like a whisper they couldn't quite hear. They knelt down, brushing away the dirt with gloved hands. The glow grew brighter, revealing a smooth, metallic surface etched with strange symbols that seemed to shift and change as they stared. It was an artifact, unlike anything they'd ever seen. The cadet reached out, their fingers trembling slightly. The moment they touched it, the world disappeared. Visions flooded their mind, flashes of light and shadow, screams of terror and triumph, a war that spanned galaxies. They saw towering figures clad in armor that shimmered like starlight, wielding weapons that could split planets in two. And they saw the artifact, glowing with the same eerie light, at the center of it all. Then, as suddenly as it began, the vision ended. The cadet gasped, stumbling back as the artifact's glow dimmed. Their heart pounded in their chest, and their breath came in short, ragged bursts. What had they just seen? What was this thing? Before they could process what had happened, a low hum filled the air. The cadet turned, their hand instinctively reaching for the blaster at their side. The hum grew louder, accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps. Shadows moved in the distance, closing in fast. The cadets' training kicked in. They grabbed the artifact, shoving it into their pack, and sprinted for cover. The shadows were closer now, resolving into figures clad in black armor, their faces hidden behind featureless helmets. They moved with a precision that spoke of years of training, their weapons trained on the cadet. "Don't move," one of them barked, their voice distorted by a modulator. "Hand over the artifact, and we'll let you live." The cadet's mind raced. They didn't know who these people were or what they wanted, but one thing was clear, they couldn't let them have the artifact. Whatever it was dangerous, too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. With a burst of speed, the cadet dove behind a crumbling wall, blaster fire erupting around them. They returned fire, their shots wild but enough to keep the attackers at bay. The artifact in their pack seemed to hum in response, as if urging them to fight harder. "You can't run forever," one of the attackers sneered. "That thing belongs to us." The cadet didn't respond. They were already moving, darting through the ruins with the agility of someone who had grown up on a planet where every step could mean life or death. The attackers followed, their shouts echoing in the empty air. As the cadet ran, the artifact's whispers grew louder, filling their mind with images of escape routes and hidden paths. They didn't question it, they couldn't afford to. They followed the visions, weaving through the ruins until they reached a hidden cave. They slipped inside, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The cave was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of mildew. The cadet pressed themselves against the wall, listening as the footsteps of their pursuers faded into the distance. For the first time since touching the artifact, they allowed themselves to breathe. But even as their heart rate slowed, they knew this was only the beginning. The artifact had chosen them, and with it came a responsibility they didn't yet understand. The cadet looked down at their pack, where the artifact's glow pulsed faintly. They didn't know what it was or why it had shown them those visions. But one thing was certain, their life would never be the same. The cave was silent except for the cadet's labored breathing. They crouched in the darkness, their back pressed against the cold, damp wall. The artifact in their pack still pulsed faintly, its glow casting eerie shadows on the rough stone around them. The cadet's mind raced, replaying the events of the last few minutes. Who were those people? Why did they want the artifact? And why had it chosen them? The whispers in their mind grew louder, more insistent. They weren't words, exactly, but feelings, urges. The artifact was guiding them, showing them the way. The cadet hesitated. Trusting a strange, alien object went against every instinct they had. But what choice did they have? The attackers were still out there, and they couldn't stay hidden forever. With a deep breath, the cadet stood and slung their pack over their shoulder. The whispers led them deeper into the cave, through narrow tunnels and over jagged rocks. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in around them. But the cadet pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. After what felt like hours, they saw a faint light ahead. It wasn't the harsh glow of artificial lights but the soft, natural light of the moon's surface. The cadet quickened their pace, hope surging in their chest. But as they neared the exit, they heard voices, harsh, guttural voices speaking in a language they didn't understand. The cadet froze, pressing themselves against the wall. Peering around the corner, they saw two of the black-armored figures standing guard at the cave's exit. Their weapons were drawn, and their heads swiveled back and forth as they scanned the area. The cadet's heart sank. There was no way they could take on both of them alone. The artifact's whispers grew more urgent, almost frantic. The cadet closed their eyes, trying to focus. The whispers guided their hand to a small, loose rock on the ground. They picked it up, their minds suddenly clear. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. With a quick, practiced motion, the cadet hurled the rock down the tunnel behind them. It clattered against the stone, echoing loudly in the confined space. The guards turned, their weapons raised, and moved toward the sound. The cadet didn't wait. They sprinted for the exit, their boots pounding against the rocky ground. One of the guards turned just as the cadet reached the mouth of the cave. Their eyes met for a split second before the cadet tackled them, sending them sprawling to the ground. The second guard shouted, raising their weapon, but the cadet was already moving. They grabbed the fallen guard's blaster and fired, the shot hitting the second guard square in the chest. The cadet didn't stop to see if they were okay. They ran, their legs burning with the effort. The moon's surface stretched out before them, barren and lifeless. In the distance, they could see their ship, a small, battered vessel that had brought them here. It was their only way off this rock. But the attackers weren't done yet. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The cadet glanced over their shoulder and saw a sleek, black shuttle descending from the sky. More of the black-armored figures were inside, their weapons trained on the cadet. The cadet pushed themselves harder, their lungs screaming for air. The artifact's whispers were a constant presence in their mind, urging them forward. They could see the ship now, its ramp still open from when they had left it. Just a little farther. A blaster shot whizzed past their head, close enough to singe their hair. The cadet dove behind a boulder, their chest heaving. They peeked out, counting the attackers. There were at least 6 of them, moving in a tight formation. The cadet gripped the stolen blaster, their mind racing. They couldn't take them all on, not without a plan. The artifact's whispers shifted, showing them a path. The cadet's eyes widened as they realized what it wanted them to do. It was risky, maybe even suicidal. But it was their only chance. With a deep breath, the cadet stood and fired a few wild shots in the attacker's direction. Then they turned and ran, not toward the ship but away from it. The attackers followed, their shouts growing louder. The cadet led them into a narrow canyon, its walls towering high on either side. As they ran, the cadet reached into their pack and pulled out the artifact. Its glow was brighter now, almost blinding. The cadet didn't hesitate. They slammed the artifact into the ground, the force of it sending a shockwave through the canyon. The walls trembled, and then, with a deafening roar, they collapsed. The cadet dove for cover as rocks rained down around them. When the dust settled, the canyon was completely blocked, the attackers buried beneath tons of rubble. The cadet lay there for a moment, their body trembling with exhaustion. They had done it. They were safe, for now. But as they looked down at the artifact, now dull and lifeless in their hands, they knew the danger was far from over. The artifact had saved them, but it had also revealed its power. And power like that always came with a price. The cadet stood, their legs shaky but determined. They had to get off this moon. They had to find answers. And they had to do it before the rest of the galaxy came looking for them. The cadet's ship groaned as it broke through the atmosphere of a remote, jungle-covered planet. The artifact sat on the control panel, its glow faint but steady. The cadet had no idea where they were going, only that the artifact had guided them here. The planet was uncharted, its surface a dense maze of towering trees and winding rivers. It was the perfect place to disappear. As the ship touched down in a small clearing, the cadet hesitated. They didn't know what, or who, they were looking for. But the artifact's whispers had led them here, and they had no choice but to trust it. They grabbed their pack, slung it over their shoulder, and stepped out into the humid air. The jungle was alive with sound. Birds chirped in the canopy above, and the distant roar of a waterfall echoed through the trees. The cadet moved cautiously, their blaster drawn. They didn't know what to expect, but they couldn't afford to let their guard down. After hours of walking, they found it, a small, run-down hut nestled in a grove of trees. Smoke curled from a makeshift chimney, and the smell of cooking food wafted through the air. The cadet's stomach growled, but they ignored it. They approached the hut slowly, their blaster raised. "You can put that away," a voice called from inside. "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead." The cadet froze. The voice was deep and gravelly, with a tone that brooked no argument. They lowered their blaster but kept their hand close to it as they stepped inside. The hut was small and cluttered, filled with strange artifacts and weapons from across the galaxy. Sitting in a chair by the fire was a man, or at least, what looked like a man. His face was scarred, and his eyes were sharp and calculating. He wore a patchwork of armor, each piece clearly taken from a different battle. He looked up at the cadet, his gaze piercing. "Took you long enough," he said, gesturing to the artifact in the cadet's pack. "I've been expecting you." The cadet blinked, stunned. "Who are you?" The man chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Call me the mentor. And you're the one the artifact chose. Lucky you." The cadet didn't know what to say. They had so many questions, but the mentor didn't give them a chance to ask. He stood, his movements slow but deliberate, and walked over to them. He reached out and touched the artifact, his fingers brushing against its surface. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. The cadets shook their head. "No. But it showed me things. Visions." The mentor nodded, as if he had expected that. "It's a weapon. But not just any weapon. It's alive, in a way. It was created by an ancient civilization, one that's long gone now. They built it to protect the galaxy from a threat so powerful, so dangerous, that they sealed it away rather than risk it falling into the wrong hands." The cadet's eyes widened. "What kind of threat?" The mentor's expression darkened. "Something you don't want to meet." "Not yet, anyway. But if the artifact chose you, it means that threat is coming back. And you're the only one who can stop it." The cadet felt a chill run down their spine. They had always been a survivor, but this was something else entirely. "I don't know if I can do this," they admitted, their voice barely above a whisper. The mentor studied them for a moment, then nodded. Good. If you weren't scared, I'd be worried. But fear isn't a weakness, not if you use it right. And that's what I'm here for. To teach you. Over the next few weeks, the mentor trained the cadet relentlessly. He taught them how to fight, how to think, how to survive. But more importantly, he taught them about the artifact. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a partner, a guide. It responded to their emotions, their thoughts, their will. The more they bonded with it, the more powerful it became. The cadet struggled at first. The artifact's power was overwhelming, and they often lost control, unleashing bursts of energy that left them exhausted and shaken. But the mentor was patient, in his own gruff way. He pushed them to their limits, but he also knew when to pull back. One night, as they sat by the fire, the cadet asked the question that had been weighing on their mind. Why are you helping me? The mentor was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual. Because I've seen what happens when people like us don't step up. The galaxy's a dangerous place, kid. And sometimes, the only thing standing between order and chaos is someone willing to fight for what's right. You've got the potential to be that someone. But it's up to you to decide if you're ready. The cadet didn't respond. They didn't know if they were ready. But they knew they didn't have a choice. The artifact had chosen them, and with it came a responsibility they couldn't ignore. As the weeks turned into months, the cadet grew stronger, more confident. They began to understand the artifact's whispers, to feel its power flowing through them. But they also began to understand the weight of what they were carrying. The artifact wasn't just a weapon, it was a legacy. And it was up to them to honor it. One day, as they trained in a clearing, the mentor stopped them. You're ready, he said simply. The cadet frowned. Ready for what? The mentor's expression was grim. For what comes next? The shadowy faction that's after you, they're not going to stop. And neither is the ancient threat. It's time for you to leave this planet. Time for you to face the galaxy. The cadet felt a surge of fear, but also determination. They nodded. What about you? The mentor smiled, a rare, almost gentle expression. I'll be here. But don't worry about me. You've got a job to do. And I have a feeling you're going to do it well. As the cadet prepared to leave, they felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, yes, but also hope. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing, they weren't alone. They had the artifact. They had the mentor's teachings. And they had the strength to face whatever came next. The cadet stood at the edge of the jungle, their ship waiting behind them. The mentor had given them coordinates, a remote outpost where the shadowy faction was rumored to be operating. It was their first mission, their first real test. The cadet's heart pounded as they adjusted their pack, the artifact's weight a constant reminder of what was at stake. The mentor had warned them. This won't be easy, he had said. They'll be waiting for you. But remember what I taught you. Trust the artifact. Trust yourself. The cadet took a deep breath and stepped out of the jungle. The outpost was a stark contrast to the lush greenery behind them, a cold, metallic structure surrounded by high walls and armed guards. The cadet crouched low, their eyes scanning the area. They counted at least a dozen guards, their black armor gleaming in the harsh light of the outpost's floodlights. The artifact's whispers grew louder, guiding their movements. The cadet moved silently, using the shadows to their advantage. They reached the outer wall and pressed themselves against it, their mind racing. They needed a way in, but the guards were too many, too well armed. The artifact pulsed in their pack, and suddenly, the cadet knew what to do. They closed their eyes, focusing on the whispers. The artifact's power surged through them, and for a moment, they felt invincible. They reached out with their mind, feeling the guard's presence, their movements. And then, with a sharp, mental push, they disrupted the guard's communication. The guards froze, confused. The cadet didn't wait. They scaled the wall with ease, their movements quick and precise. They dropped down on the other side, their blaster drawn. The guards were still trying to figure out what had happened when the cadet struck. The first guard went down with a well-placed shot to the chest. The second barely had time to raise their weapon before the cadet disarmed them with a swift kick. The artifact's power flowed through them, guiding their every move. They were faster, stronger, more focused than they had ever been. But the guards weren't the only threat. As the cadet moved deeper into the outpost, they encountered more of the black-armored figures. These were different, more skilled, more dangerous. The cadets' confidence wavered as they realized they were outmatched. One of the figures stepped forward, their weapon trained on the cadet. "You're brave, I'll give you that," they said, their voice cold and mocking. "But bravery won't save you." The cadet didn't respond. They focused on the artifact, letting its power fill them. The figure lunged, their weapon slicing through the air. The cadet dodged, but barely. They returned fire, their shots wild but enough to keep the figure at bay. The fight was brutal. The cadet was pushed to their limits, their body aching with every move. But they didn't give up. They couldn't. The artifact's whispers urged them on, reminding them of what was at stake. Finally, the cadet saw an opening. They unleashed a burst of energy from the artifact, the force of it sending the figure flying. The outpost shook, alarms blaring as the cadet made their way to the control room. They had to shut down the outpost's defenses, or they'd never make it out alive. But as they reached the control room, they realized they weren't alone. The mentor was there, his blaster drawn. He looked at the cadet, his expression unreadable. "You did well," he said. "But this isn't over." Before the cadet could respond, the mentor turned and fired at the control panel. The outpost's defenses shut down, but the mentor's shot also triggered a self-destruct sequence. The cadet's eyes widened as the countdown began. "We have to go," they shouted. The mentor shook his head. "You go. I'll hold them off." The cadet hesitated. They couldn't leave him, not after everything he had done for them. But the mentor's expression was firm. "This is my fight," he said. "Yours is just beginning. Now go." The cadet nodded, their heart heavy. They turned and ran, the outpost crumbling around them. They reached their ship just as the first explosion rocked the ground. They took off, the outpost disappearing in a blaze of fire and smoke. As they flew away, the cadet looked down at the artifact. It glowed softly, as if in mourning. The mentor was gone, but his teachings lived on. The cadet knew what they had to do. They had to honor his sacrifice. They had to stop the shadowy faction, and the ancient threat that was coming. The galaxy was counting on them. And they wouldn't let it down. The cadet's ship drifted through the void of space, the artifact resting on the control panel. Its glow was steady, but the cadet felt anything but calm. The mentor was gone, and the weight of their mission pressed heavily on their shoulders. They needed help, people they could trust, people who understood what was at stake. The artifact's whispers guided them to a distant planet, a place known for its outcasts and rebels. It was a dangerous world, but also one where alliances could be forged. The cadet set a course, their mind racing with possibilities. When they landed, the planet was everything they had expected, and more. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and sweat, and the streets were crowded with beings of all shapes and sizes. The cadet moved cautiously, their hand never far from their blaster. They didn't know who to trust, but they knew they couldn't do this alone. Their first stop was a rundown cantina on the edge of the city. The place was dimly lit, filled with the murmur of voices and the clink of glasses. The cadet scanned the room, their eyes landing on a figure sitting alone in the corner. They were tall and lean, their face hidden beneath a hood. But there was something about them, something that made the cadet think they might be worth talking to. The cadet approached the table, their heart pounding. "Mind if I sit?" they asked. The figure looked up, their eyes sharp and calculating. "Depends on what you're selling." The cadet hesitated, then sat down. "I'm not selling anything. I need help." The figure raised an eyebrow. "Help with what?" The cadet leaned in, lowering their voice. "There's a faction, a dangerous one. They're after something I have. And if they get it, the whole galaxy could be in trouble." The figure studied them for a moment, then nodded. "You're talking about the Black Talons. Nasty bunch. What makes you think I can help?" The cadet reached into their pack and pulled out the artifact. Its glow lit up the table, casting strange shadows on the walls. The figure's eyes widened, and they leaned in closer. "Where did you get that?" they asked, their voice barely above a whisper. "It's a long story," the cadet said. "But I need people who can fight. People who aren't afraid to stand up to the Talons." The figure was silent for a long time. Then they nodded. "All right. I'm in. But you're going to need more than just me." Over the next few days, the cadet and their new ally, a former soldier named Jax, recruited others to their cause. There was Kira, a skilled pilot with a quick wit and a quicker trigger finger. There was Rin, a tech genius who could hack into any system. And there was Voss, a hulking brute of a man with a heart of gold and a knack for breaking things. Together, they formed a small but loyal team. Each member brought unique skills and perspectives, and though they didn't always get along, they shared a common goal: to stop the Black Talons and protect the galaxy. The cadet felt a glimmer of hope as they looked at their team. They weren't alone anymore. They had allies, people who believed in their mission. But they also knew the road ahead would be difficult. The Talons were powerful, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. One night, as the team sat around a campfire on a remote moon, the cadet spoke up. "We need a plan," they said. "We can't just keep running. We need to take the fight to them." Jax nodded. "Agreed. But we're going to need more than just guts. We need intel, something that can give us an edge." Rin grinned, their fingers flying over a holographic keyboard. "Leave that to me. I've already started digging. The Talons have a base on a planet called Zorith. If we can infiltrate it, we might be able to find something useful." Kira leaned back, her arms crossed. "And how do you propose we do that? Walk in the front door?" Voss chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "I like that plan. Simple. Direct." The cadet smiled, feeling a sense of camaraderie they hadn't felt in a long time. "We'll figure it out," they said. Together. As the fire crackled and the stars shone overhead, the cadet felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had a team. They had a plan. And they had the artifact. The road ahead would be dangerous, but they were ready. The galaxy was counting on them. And they wouldn't let it down. The team's ship hovered in the shadow of a massive asteroid, its engines running silent. On the view screen, the Black Talons base on Zorith loomed like a dark fortress. The cadets stared at it, their heart pounding. This was it, their chance to strike back. But something felt off. The artifact in their pack pulsed faintly, as if warning them. "All right," Jax said, breaking the silence. "Here's the plan. Rin, you'll hack into their systems and disable their defenses. Kira, you're on the ship, ready to pick us up if things go south. Voss and I will handle the guards. Cadet, you're with me. We need to find whatever intel they've got on the artifact." The cadet nodded, but their mind was elsewhere. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The artifact's whispers were louder now, more urgent. But they didn't have time to dwell on it. The mission was underway. The team moved quickly and quietly, their training evident in every step. Rin's hacking skills were as sharp as ever, and within minutes, the base's defenses were down. Voss and Jax took out the guards with precision, their movements smooth and efficient. The cadet followed close behind, their blaster drawn. As they made their way deeper into the base, the cadet's unease grew. The halls were eerily quiet, almost too quiet. The artifact's whispers became a constant hum in their mind, urging them to be careful. But before they could voice their concerns, Jax stopped in front of a heavily secured door. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "The main data hub. Cadet, you're with me. Voss, keep watch." The cadet followed Jax into the room, their eyes scanning the rows of consoles and holographic displays. Jax began downloading the data, his fingers flying over the controls. The cadets stood guard, their blaster at the ready. But as they watched Jax, something caught their eye, a small, almost imperceptible movement. Jax's hand slipped to his side, where a hidden compartment in his armor held a small device. The cadet's heart skipped a beat. They had seen that device before. It was a tracker, the kind the Black Talons used to monitor their targets. "Jax," the cadet said, their voice tight. "What are you doing?" Jax froze, his back still turned. For a moment, there was silence. Then he sighed and turned around, his expression cold and unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said. But this was never about the artifact. It was about survival. The cadet's blood ran cold. "You're working for them." Jax didn't deny it. "The Talons offered me a deal. They promised to leave me alone if I delivered you, and the artifact. I didn't have a choice." The cadet's grip tightened on their blaster. "You had a choice. You chose to betray us." Jax's eyes hardened. "You don't understand. The Talons are everywhere. You can't fight them. You can't win." Before the cadet could respond, the door burst open, and a dozen Black Talon soldiers stormed in, their weapons trained on the cadet. Jax stepped back, his face a mask of regret. "I'm sorry," he said again. "But this is how it has to be." The cadet's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But they couldn't give up, not now. The artifact's whispers grew louder, filling their mind with a single, clear thought: fight. With a roar, the cadet unleashed the artifact's power. A wave of energy exploded from them, knocking the soldiers off their feet. The room shook, consoles sparking and screens shattering. Jax stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. "You don't understand," the cadet said, their voice steady despite the chaos. "This isn't just about survival. It's about doing what's right." Jax didn't respond. He turned and ran, disappearing into the chaos. The cadet didn't chase him. They had bigger problems. The base's alarms were blaring, and more soldiers were on their way. The cadet grabbed the data drive Jax had been downloading and sprinted out of the room. Voss was waiting in the hall, his weapon drawn. "What happened?" he asked, his voice gruff. "Jax betrayed us," the cadet said, their voice tight with anger. "We need to get out of here. Now." Voss didn't ask questions. He followed the cadet as they fought their way back to the ship. Kira was waiting, her face pale but determined. "Where's Jax?" she asked as they boarded. "He's not coming," the cadet said. "Let's go." As the ship took off, the cadet looked down at the artifact. Its glow was steady, but they could feel its power waning. They had used a lot of energy in the fight, and they weren't sure how much more they had left. But they didn't have time to rest. The Talons would be after them now more than ever. And they still had a galaxy to save. As the ship sped away from Zorith, the cadet felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, but also determination. They had lost a friend, but they had also gained something, clarity. They knew what they were fighting for. And they wouldn't let anyone, not even a former ally, stand in their way. The cadets' ship hurtled through hyperspace, the stars blurring into streaks of light. The team sat in tense silence, the weight of Jax's betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Kira piloted the ship with her usual skill, but her knuckles were white on the controls. Voss sat in the back, his massive arms crossed, his expression grim. Rin was busy analyzing the data they had stolen from the Talon's base, their fingers flying over the holographic keyboard. The cadets stared out the view screen, their mind racing. They had trusted Jax, and he had betrayed them. But they couldn't afford to dwell on it. The Talons were still out there, and the artifact's power was fading. They needed a plan, and fast. "We can't keep running," the cadet said, breaking the silence. "We need to take the fight to them." Voss grunted in agreement. "I'm tired of hiding. Let's crush them." Kira glanced over her shoulder. "And how do you propose we do that? We're outnumbered and outgunned." Rin looked up from their work. "Not necessarily. The data we stole has the location of the Talon's main fleet. If we can take out their command ship, the rest will fall apart." The cadet leaned forward. "Can we do it?" Rin hesitated, then nodded. "It's risky, but yes. We'll need to hit them hard and fast. No room for mistakes." The cadet looked at their team, what was left of it. They had lost Jax, but they still had Kira, Voss, and Rin. And they had the artifact. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Let's do it," the cadet said. "For the mentor. For everyone the Talons have hurt. We end this." The Talons' fleet was massive, a sprawling armada of sleek, black ships that blotted out the stars. The cadets' ship was a speck in comparison, but they had one advantage: surprise. Kira piloted the ship with precision, weaving through the fleet's defenses. Rin worked furiously to disable the Talon's sensors, while Voss manned the weapons, his face set in a determined scowl. The cadet stood in the center of the ship, the artifact in their hands. Its glow was faint, but they could still feel its power. They closed their eyes, focusing on the whispers in their mind. The artifact showed them the way, guiding their every move. "We're approaching the command ship," Kira said, her voice tight. "Get ready." The cadet nodded. "Voss, take out their shields. Rin, disable their weapons. Kira, get us as close as you can." The team moved with practiced efficiency. Voss's shots hit their mark, the command ship's shields flickering and dying. Rin's hacking skills were as sharp as ever, and within moments, the ship's weapons were offline. "We're in," Kira said, bringing the ship in for a landing. "But we won't have much time." The cadet took a deep breath. "Let's go." The command ship was a maze of dark corridors and armed guards. The cadet led the way, the artifact's power guiding them. They fought their way through, their movements quick and precise. Voss was a force of nature, his sheer strength and determination clearing a path. Kira and Rin covered their flanks, their skills complementing each other perfectly. But as they neared the bridge, the cadet felt a familiar presence. Jax was waiting for them, his blaster drawn. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice cold. The cadet stepped forward, their eyes locked on his. "You betrayed us. But this isn't about you anymore. This is about stopping the Talons." Jax's expression wavered, but only for a moment. "You don't understand. They'll never stop. Not until they have the artifact. Then we'll stop them," the cadet said. "Together." Jax hesitated, his grip on his blaster tightening. But before he could respond, the ship shook violently, throwing everyone off their feet. The cadet looked up to see the Talon's leader standing in the doorway, a cruel smile on their face. "Enough," the leader said. "You've caused enough trouble." The cadets stood, their heart pounding. They could feel the artifact's power surging within them, but they also knew the cost. Using its full power could destroy them, but it might be the only way to stop the Talons. With a roar, the cadet unleashed the artifact's energy. A blinding light filled the room, and the ship shook with the force of it. The Talons' leader was thrown back, their body slamming into the wall. Jax shielded his eyes, his expression one of shock and awe. When the light faded, the cadet stood alone, the artifact's glow dim but steady. The Talons' leader was unconscious, and the ship's systems were failing. "We need to go," Kira said, her voice urgent. "The ship's going to blow." The cadet nodded, their body trembling with exhaustion. They turned to Jax, who was still on the floor. "Come with us," they said. "It's not too late." Jax looked at them, his eyes filled with regret. I can't. I made my choice." The cadet wanted to argue, but there was no time. They turned and ran, their team close behind. They made it back to their ship just as the command ship exploded, the force of it sending them hurtling through space. As they flew away, the cadet looked down at the artifact. Its glow was faint, but they could still feel its presence. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. And they knew one thing for certain, they couldn't do it alone. The cadet's ship drifted in the quiet of space, the remnants of the Talons' fleet fading into the distance. The team sat in silence, the weight of their recent victory, and losses, hanging heavy in the air. The artifact rested on the control panel, its glow faint but steady. The cadets stared at it, their mind racing. They had defeated the Talons, but they knew this was only the beginning. Rin broke the silence, their voice tense. "The data we stole from the Talons' base, it's worse than we thought." The cadet turned to them. "What do you mean?" Rin pulled up a holographic display, showing a series of encrypted files. The Talons weren't just after the artifact for power. They were trying to stop something ancient and dangerous. The artifact was created to protect the galaxy from it. Kira frowned. "What are we talking about here? Another fleet? A weapon?" Rin shook their head. "No. Something bigger. The files call it the Eclipse. It's not just a threat, it's a force. A being. And it's coming." The cadet felt a chill run down their spine. The artifact's whispers grew louder, more urgent. They had felt this presence before, in the visions the artifact had shown them. But now, it was real. "How much time do we have?" the cadet asked. Rin hesitated. "Not much. The Talons were trying to delay it, but they failed. The eclipse is already on its way." Voss slammed his fist on the console, his voice a low growl. "Then we fight. We've taken down the Talons. We can take down this thing too." The cadet nodded, but their mind was elsewhere. They could feel the artifact's power waning, its energy drained from the battle. They didn't know if they had enough strength left to face this new threat. But they didn't have a choice. "We need to warn the galaxy," the cadet said. "If this thing is as dangerous as the files say, we can't face it alone." Kira sighed. "And who's going to believe us? We're just a bunch of outcasts with a glowing rock." The cadet looked at the artifact, its faint glow reflecting in their eyes. "They'll believe us when they see this. We just need to get to someone who can help." The team set a course for the Galactic Council's headquarters, a massive space station at the heart of the galaxy. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. As they traveled, the cadets spent hours studying the artifact, trying to understand its power. The whispers in their mind grew clearer, showing them glimpses of the eclipse, a dark, swirling mass of energy that consumed everything in its path. The cadet knew they had to be ready. They trained with Voss, honing their combat skills. They worked with Rin, learning how to harness the artifact's energy more effectively. And they talked with Kira, who reminded them of the importance of staying focused. "We've come this far," Kira said one night, her voice soft but firm. "We can't give up now." The cadet nodded, but they couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over them. The eclipse was coming, and they didn't know if they could stop it. When they finally reached the Galactic Council's headquarters, the cadet was met with skepticism. The council members listened to their story, but their expressions ranged from disbelief to outright dismissal. "You expect us to believe that some ancient force is coming to destroy the galaxy?" one council member asked, their voice dripping with sarcasm. The cadet stepped forward, holding up the artifact. Its glow brightened, filling the room with an eerie light. "This is the proof. The artifact was created to protect us. But it's not enough on its own. We need your help." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, one of them, a tall, stern-looking woman, stood. "If what you're saying is true, then we have no choice. We'll mobilize our forces. But know this, if you're wrong, the consequences will be on your head." The cadet nodded, their heart pounding. They didn't have time to argue. The eclipse was coming, and they had to be ready. As the galaxy prepared for war, the cadet stood on the observation deck of the Council's space station, staring out at the stars. The artifact rested in their hands, its glow steady but faint. They could feel its power, but they also felt its weight. The responsibility was almost too much to bear. Kira joined them, her expression grim. "You know this might not end well, right?" The cadet nodded. "I know. But we have to try." Kira placed a hand on their shoulder. "You're not alone. We're in this together." The cadet smiled, feeling a glimmer of hope. They had a team. They had allies. And they had the artifact. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As they looked out at the stars, the cadet felt a surge of determination. The eclipse was coming, but they were ready. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for the galaxy. And they wouldn't stop until the threat was gone. The galaxy stood on the brink of destruction. The eclipse was coming, its dark, swirling mass visible even from the farthest reaches of space. The Galactic Council had mobilized its forces, but the cadet knew it wouldn't be enough. The artifact was the key, the only thing that could stop the eclipse. But using it would come at a cost. The cadet stood on the bridge of the Council's flagship, the artifact in their hands. Its glow was faint now, its energy nearly depleted. They could feel its whispers, faint but insistent. It was time. Kira, Voss, and Rin stood beside them, their faces grim but determined. They had come so far together, and now they faced their greatest challenge. "Are you sure about this?" Kira asked, her voice soft but steady. The cadet nodded. "It's the only way." Voss placed a hand on their shoulder, his grip firm. "You're not doing this alone. We're with you." Rin stepped forward, their eyes filled with determination. "We've got your back. Whatever happens, we're in this together." The cadet felt a surge of gratitude. They had lost so much, the mentor, Jax, and countless others. But they had also gained something priceless, a family. And they would fight for that family, no matter the cost. The eclipse loomed closer, its dark energy casting a shadow over the galaxy. The Council's fleet moved into position, their weapons trained on the massive entity. But the cadet knew it wouldn't be enough. The eclipse wasn't just a physical threat, it was a force of destruction, a being of pure energy. Only the artifact could stop it. The cadet stepped into a small shuttle, the artifact cradled in their arms. Kira piloted the ship, her hands steady on the controls. Voss and Rin manned the weapons, their eyes focused on the task ahead. As they approached the eclipse, the cadet felt a wave of fear. The entity was massive, its dark energy swirling like a storm. But they couldn't back down. They had come too far to give up now. "This is it," the cadet said, their voice steady. "Once we're inside, there's no turning back." Kira nodded, her expression grim. "We're ready." The shuttle plunged into the eclipse, the dark energy engulfing them. The cadet felt a surge of power as the artifact's glow brightened, its energy fighting against the darkness. They closed their eyes, focusing on the whispers in their mind. The artifact showed them the way, guiding them to the heart of the eclipse. When they reached the center, the cadet stepped out of the shuttle, the artifact in their hands. The darkness pressed in around them, but the artifact's light held it at bay. They could feel the eclipse's presence, a cold, malevolent force that sought only to destroy. "This ends now," the cadet said, their voice firm. They raised the artifact, its light growing brighter and brighter. The eclipse recoiled, its dark energy swirling in protest. But the cadet didn't stop. They poured all their strength, all their will, into the artifact. Its light exploded outward, filling the eclipse with a blinding radiance. The cadet felt a surge of pain as the artifact's energy coursed through them. They could feel their life force draining, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. The galaxy was counting on them. As the light grew brighter, the eclipse began to dissolve, its dark energy consumed by the artifact's power. The cadet felt a sense of peace, knowing they had done what they had to do. They had saved the galaxy. But the cost was high. When the light faded, the eclipse was gone. The cadet stood alone in the void, the artifact's glow dim but steady. They could feel their strength fading, their body growing weaker with each passing moment. Kira, Voss, and Rin rushed to their side, their faces filled with concern. "You did it," Kira said, her voice trembling. "You saved us." The cadet smiled, their vision growing blurry. "It was worth it." Voss placed a hand on their shoulder, his grip firm. "You're not done yet. We're getting you out of here." But the cadets shook their head. "It's too late. The artifact, it took everything I had." Rin's eyes filled with tears. "No. You can't leave us. Not now." The cadet reached out, their hand trembling. "Take care of each other. And tell the galaxy, tell them to be brave. To fight for what's right." As their vision faded, the cadet felt a sense of peace. They had done what they had to do. They had saved the galaxy. And they knew their sacrifice would not be in vain. The galaxy mourned the loss of the cadet, but their legacy lived on. The artifact, now dormant, was placed in a place of honor, a symbol of hope and courage. Kira, Voss, and Rin continued to fight for the galaxy, inspired by the cadet's sacrifice. And though the cadet was gone, their story was not forgotten. It became a legend, a tale of bravery and selflessness that inspired countless others to stand up for what was right. The galaxy was safe, but the cadet's sacrifice was a reminder that peace came at a cost. And as long as there were those willing to fight for it, the galaxy would endure.